You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Today we will be talking to KAMELA SALIMI, who has just graduated from the Cambridge Muslim College in the UK with a diploma in Islamic psychology, which is a new emerging field. But before that, some news headlines. Bank of Canada raises interest rate. Calls to ban forced Uyghur labour products. Study shows Canadian healthcare increasingly difficult to access. Albania to cut diplomatic ties with Iran over cyber attacks. Now the details. The Bank of Canada has increased today its target of an overnight interest rate to 3.25% for the fifth time in what is described as historically high inflation. The central bank noted in its press release that the economy is operating in excess demand, while labour markets are still tight. Canada's gross domestic product grew by 3.3% in the second quarter. However, the growth was less than the bank had predicted. In the second quarter, domestic demand indicators were high. Consumption grew by 9.5%, while business investments were up by 12%. According to the press release, the bank is expecting the economy to moderate in the second half of the year. Canadian-based Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project, the URAP, is calling on the Canadian government to block Chinese products made using Uyghur forced labour, following the UN's report on China's treatment of Uyghurs. The UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights released a report on the human rights situation in East Turkestan on August 30th. According to the report, China's detention of Uyghurs and other mostly Muslim ethnic groups in the region, quote, may constitute crimes against humanity. Kayum Masimov, project manager of URAP, says to a media source that buying products using Uyghur forced labor is paying for and subsidizing the ongoing genocide indirectly. A study on Canadian healthcare by the Angus Reid Institute shows that it is increasingly becoming difficult to access key health services. In the past 6 months, 2 in 5 Canadians were unable to get one of the 5 key health services. These are non-emergency care, emergency care, surgery, diagnostic testing, and specialist appointments. 61% of Canadians reported not being confident about accessing emergency care. 9 million Canadians are facing chronic difficulty in getting health care. This includes mostly people from British Columbia and Atlantic Canada, and young men and women. Albania has terminated diplomatic relations with Iran over what its Prime Minister, Edi Rama, called intense cyber attacks. Iranian diplomatic and technical administrative personnel, including security personnel, were requested to leave the territory of the Republic of Albania within 24 hours. This decision was made known with an official note to the Embassy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Tensions between Albania and Iran have been tense since 2014, when Albania accepted around 3,000 members of an opposition group called the People's Mujahideen of Iran. The US has released a statement supporting Albania's decision. Albania is a NATO ally. And that's it for the news. At Canadian Muslim News, we have been covering Muslim mental health over the past few months. Today, we are joined by a graduate from a new, unique diploma in Islamic psychology from Cambridge Muslim College. We are joined by KAMELA SALIMI. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Cambridge Muslim College is based in the US. It's accredited with the British Accrediting Association, and it's apparently one of the first Muslim colleges in the UK to develop a unique program blending Islamic studies with quote-unquote Western studies. Yeah. You're a graduate of this new program they've just started called Islamic Psychology, I think. I don't know if that's the exact term. Tell us about the diploma. Why did you apply for it?
Yeah, so I've been a practicing psychotherapist for about 5 years now. And while I'm open to seeing everyone, what I found is that I was getting a lot of Muslim clients. And so in the back of my mind, I was always wondering, are the services I'm providing in line with Islamic teachings? Are there tools that I'm missing? So that was one of the reasons when I found out about the program, I felt it would be really, really important as a Muslim psychotherapist trained in the West to kind of learn about what Islamic psychology has to offer and how I can better support Muslim clients.
You've used a few phrases that people in our audience might be a little bit confused about. So first of all, there's a psychologist, there's a psychiatrist, and then there's a psychotherapist. How about telling us the difference between those three?
Yeah. So this is also, it was interesting for me because I'm a psychotherapist. So I was wondering, is this the right program for me? The answer is different from area to area. Within Canada, a psychiatrist is someone who's considered a doctor. They're able to diagnose and prescribe medication. Psychologists are able to assess. Psychotherapists were not allowed to do that. It's more talk therapy, things like that. But there's the overlap of working with clients, supporting their mental health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the Muslim community, we have a lot of people who don't want to go anywhere near anything like mental health, and there are also, folk beliefs that if you're depressed, it's because you're not reading enough Quran, or if you have a condition, you're possessed by a jinn. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned about the Islamic tradition of mental health?
Yeah, so definitely what I found is within the Muslim community, there is a hesitation to seek counseling. There's a fear of what's going to happen if the non-Muslim psychotherapists or even Muslim psychotherapists trained in the West will understand kind of what's happening for the client. And again, what I learned, and not to go into the philosophy of it, but there is some valid concerns, because one of the things we learned about the foundational piece of Islamic psychology is it does take revelation into context. A lot of the kind of how the therapist shows up is informed by the Quran. And we know within Western psychology, things like, more metaphysical concepts aren't discussed. So there is that kind of barrier to Muslims kind of wanting to access those services.
One of the things that the website proclaims is that they're doing something very unique. They're not Islamizing a secular curriculum, and they're not having a secular curriculum plus a few Islamic modules. Yeah. They're taking something new, Islamic psychology based in the Quran and Sunnah and the tradition. I was wondering if you could explain what that means.
So that's one of the things I loved about this program, because I went in with the assumption that I would have to leave whatever I've learned within Western psychology. And this diploma program is actually a really good bridging program. It brings the East and the West together. The difference foundationally with Islamic psychology is it looks at empirical evidence, rational evidence, and revelation. And it shows that the three can coexist. And it talks about the heart and the soul, whereas Western psychology is more empirical evidence and rational evidence. It's kind of revelation isn't mentioned, religion isn't mentioned. So what I found was that Islamic psychology kind of validated what I was already doing, but then it added those additional tools that were to an extent also informed by revelation.
If we have this understanding of psychology in our tradition, do you have any idea why Muslim community now is so sort of hesitant to go and get counseling?
It's a complicated question. We could get into colonialism, all those other things. Just adding to that, what we found was there's such a focus on Western psychology. We do have such a rich history that we haven't tapped into. And so I think it's lack of knowledge. Historically, we know that, Muslims were one of the first people in the world to create psychiatric wards. There was holistic interventions to well-being that addressed the needs of the mind, the body, the soul. The creation of Maristans, which were hospitals in the Islamic history. All of those provided holistic services. I think it's just, it's a lack of knowledge. Lots of stuff.
Knowledge of our own history then.
Yeah.
You just talked about three needs: mind, body, and soul. Are you able to elaborate a bit on what the needs of the mind would be?
Yeah. So what we found is that in Western psychology, there's a focus on the body and the mind, whereas in Islamic psychology, there's the mind, the body, and the soul. And that's where kind of the spirituality piece comes in, the divine revelation. But when it comes to the needs of the mind, I feel like it's all connected. One is not separate from the other. So that's where kind of the whole holistic piece comes in.
Well, let's try to make this practical. It's been very abstract, but let's, you've got a client who comes in who is depressed or has anxiety or insomnia, panic attacks, trauma, something. How's it going to look like to be a psychotherapist with this Islamic spiritual heritage now?
Yeah, so contrary to popular belief, I went in thinking, okay, we have to go into the session, we have to bring Allah into it, and then the Prophet, and then all these Islamic terminologies. But actually, what I found is Islamic psychology really validates what I've already been doing within Western psychology, which is show up for the client in a non-judgmental way, hold empathy, hold compassion. And what Islam adds to that is it gives us more to work with. So one of the things we learn is the heart of the therapist is really important. So the therapist embodying the qualities of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the way he showed up to his companions, to his friends, to his family, all of those things. And then when it comes to specific interventions, Islam is not a purist approach. So it wouldn't be that, okay, it's CBT that we use for every client. It's about kind of catering to what fits for the client in that moment, whatever that might look like based on assessment, things like that.
So you don't have a particular set of go read these verses or go do this kind of dhikr or...
It would really depend on the client. It would depend on kind of where they're at spiritually speaking. Some clients might have trauma related to faith, so doing that would not work for them. But it would depend on each client.
Yeah. That kind of ties into my next question. Canada is, a multicultural, multi-faith society, and it's secular. And there are a lot of people who might come from a Muslim family, but who don't want to practice the faith. They don't want to be Muslim, let's say. So even if their name is, Muhammad Salimi, and they come to you and say, I have, whatever condition, how do you make that determination that this is somebody I'll use Islamic psychotherapy on versus this is somebody who I shouldn't?
Yeah, this is something I do on a daily basis in my work. It's really meeting where the client is at. It's doing the assessment. Islamic psychology is actually very client-centered. So it's checking in with the client, asking questions, checking in if I've crossed the boundary, if I'm bringing up faith, what the client's relationship to the faith is, and then following their kind of lead and going from there. And for some clients, that might mean it feels very spiritual. God is a very big part of a session. For other people, that might not be the case, and that's okay too.
How do you do that in a non-judgmental way? Do you pray, or how does it come out?
So it starts even in the phone consult when they initially call me. One of the questions I ask is, what about my profile stood out to you? And then they'll say, you're Muslim. Faith is important to me. I'd like you to incorporate faith. For other people, it'll be, well, I know you understand the cultural piece, but I don't really want you to touch the faith piece when we're in session. But also the other thing is Islamic psychology is based on the natural human inclination. So a lot of what I'm doing, I would do with Muslims and non-Muslims. It would be universal. It's just, empathy, being non-judgmental, tapping into kind of the body, things like that would work for anyone.
And does your scarf deter non-Muslim clients from coming?
Yeah, so that was one of my concerns when I went into private practice. The reality is it is a deterrent. I think there's a fear maybe from non-Muslims that in session I might try to convert them. But surprisingly, it's happened in the other direction too, where sometimes Muslims themselves, when they see me, they might not want to work for me if there's trauma history. If faith was used kind of as a tool for abuse, they might think, oh my God, she's going to judge me. I'm not going to her. So it works both ways.
Yeah. Well, what will be the next steps for you after this diploma? What comes next?
Yeah, so I'm going to continue with supervision. I've just scratched the surface on Islamic psychology. There's so much more I need to learn. I will be continuing with supervision with the International Association of Islamic Psychology. And then I would like to do some research with the attachment theory and looking at God as a secure attachment figure. I don't know if you'd like me to go into detail about that.
No,
But
no, unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm sorry to cut you. But thanks for joining us and telling us a little bit about this new program.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe and God bless.